I know that your work has been shown in many places and even works from the series, but I would love to hear from you. What were your first impressions when you entered the room?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised, actually. It seemed to work fine. I mean, but also it's a little hard to say, you know, how did you like the way the exhibition was, because I was really interested in seeing things that I hadn't seen in a while kind of together. And so to see all the models and the drawings, I don't often, in fact, really see them together. So it was interesting. And the thing that, in a way, makes the most sense and is a kind of explanation, but it doesn't seem so obvious. But if you look on that wall and see the photographs of the synagogue, and then you see the drawings that were made later, and then you drift across to my models and the drawings, all of a sudden they seem to come together in a way. They're not so, it's not a literal version of what you see, but it's not so hard to imagine how they could come together. So if we were to somehow overlay them in a way, I mean, they would make some kind of sense. So I think the structure that's underlying the actual objects that were the start of the idea are, you know, still valid.
This is an unusual exhibition because we are showing your work in relation to the photographs and drawings that inspired it. And when's the last time that you looked at the inspiration for these works?
Well, it's tricky because you're using the word inspiration. It's just, I have the book, it's not far from my hand on my desk, so I look at it every once in a while because I think about it for other ideas. But I mean, you know, it's basically, you know, it's after a certain point, you're finished with something. On the other hand, you're never finished with it because the idea that was both involved and evolved in the process of making the pieces, which is essentially a way of putting things together and an idea about structure and how the structure creates an image that has some sense of validity. That's what what art making is all about. So you don't really ever forget about it, and there's lots of things you don't forget about, and you don't know how it's going to come back. And usually, in some little way, at least, things do come back.
I know that you know these synagogues from photographs and drawings, but our Gwoździec synagogue project actually shows what these buildings looked like to scale. What was your impression when you saw the timber-framed roof of our Gwoździec synagogue?
Well, I thought it was great, but that's what I thought. I have to say I was, in a certain sense, not very surprised because with a certain amount of sense of what wood is about and what woodworking, you know, without nails and things. I mean, joining and working with wood, and there, of course, were photographs. So, I mean, I had a sense of what it would be like. It's great to see it, and it's very impressive. But I can only say that, you know, I don't know what it means to say that that's what I thought it should look like.
And I was thinking that there's a difference between seeing drawings and photographs and seeing this construction, this timber framing, in 3 dimensions, 360 degrees in the round.
Yeah, it's very dramatic and everything, and it's true that the scale counts, but you know, there's something about that kind of building or that kind of thing. I mean, I'm not going to be the builder. I'm not going to be chopping away at that wood, and I'm not going to try to pound the dowels in. So I take a kind of distant view. I totally appreciative, and I certainly understand how hard it is to do it. But I don't think that would stop me from designing something that would make somebody work equally as hard or might be as complicated. So it's a question of relating to what you think about and what you want to build. And as I say, somehow with this work, I became, you know, I just accepted the idea that what I really liked about painting and what I wanted to do was build my own painting. So that way, but I didn't really mean it that way. I wanted to build my own painting, but I really wanted somebody else to build it for me. But the idea was there that then I would have something that I would work on. And I might paint it, I might color it, I might collage, I might do a lot of things. But I wanted to have something that I made somehow from the ground up. And so that was, and you know, you might say that's a basically architectural idea. Well, it may be, but I mean, basically it works.
Well, you know, there was once hundreds of these wooden synagogues across the length and breadth of this territory, and during World War II, all of them were destroyed. And I find it incredibly moving to think that, in a way, these works have come home. They've come to the place that inspired them.
Well, I have to admit that it seemed to me like the idea of finding the roots, these happen to be my paintings, but the roots of the structures and the way and thinking that where they came from and what that belonged to, you know, it's complicated in a sense that, yes, they, in a certain sense, they come home. On the other hand, you know, the home for me is, this is one home for them, but the other home, of course, is the path, the unfortunate path of the destruction of the synagogues, but also the path of modernism, of modern abstraction, which follows the path of the destruction.
Have you shown your work in Poland before? Or is this the first time, or the first time for a one-man show?
Well, certainly this is the first that I know of. I mean, I know some prints was shown here when I came. One time I visited Warsaw. It was many years ago for a print exhibition of Ken Tyler's collection from a Swedish collector in Sweden. But other than that, I wasn't here.
I wondered if you'd had an opportunity to really look at the documentation in this exhibition, because there are many photographs and drawings from the original archive that are not in the Wooden Synagogue book.
No, I have the enlarged book, but I haven't studied the new documentation.
We were very happy to be able to show you our core exhibition, A 1,000-Year History of Polish Jews, and I'd be very curious about your impression.
Well, it's pretty powerful, but I mean, it's really interesting. But I mean, it's, you know, I don't know how much you can learn in one trip through, but you know, it's a tremendous, you know, it's not that it's interesting. I mean, you know, and informative. It's all of those kind of things. But I mean, it presents a kind of historical panorama that, you know, it's impossible on a certain level to digest. But I will say one thing, if you don't mind, a little critical.
Absolutely.
But which is, I'm not sure how much I can absorb or you can absorb with this business of what we have of reconstructive imagery. I mean, I think that there's no way of getting around it, and I think it's important and useful. But there's something about the taking of, well, it's a simple thing. If you look at a photograph that's relatively dated, and then you see that photograph blown up or presented on backlit surface, I mean, you don't know why you're losing something or learning something. It's hard to tell. I mean, but it's kind of tough it's kind of tough on your concentration, the drama of it, of the presentation. But it's fantastically good, and everybody seems to love it, so I'm not going to complain.
Thank you very, very much, Frank. We are delighted to have you here, and we are so pleased to be the organizer and the host of your exhibition of the Polish Village series.